In San Francisco, and this is Bloomberg Technology, bringing you all the major stories in tech around the globe. Coming up in the next hour, an exclusive interview with one of the most legendary venture capitalists in Silicon Valley, John Doerr, chairman of Kleiner Perkins and an early investor in Google and Amazon, joins me here in the studio. Plus, the future of artificial intelligence. The White House says it is taking a hands-off approach to AI regulation. Does this mean more industries will be disrupted and faster? And Amazon has taken on streaming, hardware, and the cloud in recent years to much success. So why is it still falling behind on diversity? We're going to discuss a modest proposal for Jeff Bezos. Build a 50-50 gender-balanced workforce at HQ2 from scratch. But first, to our top story. From self-driving cars to robot-powered factories, artificial intelligence is taking over significant chunks of the global economy, backing up the outlook that AI will bring a revolution to our economy and our society. But with this new technology comes new questions about its impact and ethics. Joining us now to discuss, Glenn Weil, principal researcher at Microsoft and a visiting senior research scholar in economics and law at Yale University. He also recently wrote a book, Radical Markets. Bloomberg Tech's Mark Bergen, who covers Alphabet for us, also with me here. So, Glenn, first give us the lay of the land where we stand when it comes to AI technology. How much further will we go, and how disruptive will it be?
Well, I think the real gap that we have to bridge is productivity technology. We've been having lots of interesting consumer-facing things. We recently saw the advances that Alphabet's made in their Google Assistant. And there's lots of fun gadgets that we're all playing with. But in terms of really this projection of real job displacement, real changes to the workforce, self-driving, we haven't really seen on the productivity side, on delivering improvements in the workplace, we haven't seen a lot of progress there. So I think that that's really the bridge that has to be reached if we're going to make a difference.
So, with the White House saying they're going to be hands-off when it comes to regulation, is that a good thing, and what does it mean?
Well, I don't think that that's necessarily going to actually make the economy more productive. The reason is, if you think about these new regulations they've brought in Europe, the general data protection regulations, those, I think, are potentially going to be very important to creating a market in consumer data, which might potentially actually improve the productivity of this economy by giving people more rewards for creating better data for the economy.
So you mentioned the Google Assistant, and Mark, you were just at Google I/O where this was debuted. We actually have a soundbite of the Assistant speaking with a restaurant. Take a listen.
See, how may I help you?
Hi, I'd like to reserve a table for Wednesday the 7th.
For 7 people?
It's for 4 people.
4 people when?
Next Wednesday at 6 p.m.
Now, there were some folks out there who called that horrifying, but it is also an amazing example of how far voice technology has come.
It's an amazing example, and it's just an example. I mean, to be clear, they don't have the product out in the live. They weren't demoing it this week, so people couldn't actually see it or test it in use. I think Google was a little bit caught flat-footed about the response. They came out actually yesterday and said we're likely going to when we unroll this product, we're going to identify that it's Google Assistant calling, and so a person on the other end doesn't know that they're talking. Will know they're talking to a robot and not a person.
Glenn, does that example horrify you, or just pique your interest?
I think it's interesting, but I think it's strategically chosen, of course, to be exactly something that the system happens to be capable of doing. And just emulating a voice well is a very, very, very far distance from being able to do, for example, secretarial work or scheduling or the sorts of things that are actually going to start changing the shape of the economy. And that's the sort of productivity advancements that I think would really make a difference.
So, Mark, when it comes to AI and the big tech giants, who's in the lead? Everyone seems to be vying for this territory, some farther than others. Of course, Amazon Alexa has also captured the fascination of the world. But as Glenn has said, it's not just about these voice assistants. It is so much more.
Yeah, I guess it depends on how you define lead, right? I mean, certainly you could argue that research capabilities, Google and Alphabet, is widely considered a leader. Microsoft is too. Amazon is sort of lagging behind. Yet at the same time, they were first to market with Alexa, and Alexa is almost a verb now, right? People think about, I'm just going to ask my Alexa for something, even though there are competing voice assistants from Google and Apple. So that's one way to measure it. I think we haven't seen a lot of clarity. The White House came and said we're not going to regulate AI. Some people will say it's impossible to regulate AI because AI is just math. Right, but where when the machine learning tools affect, say, like truckers and the state of the employment in truckers, or move more into sectors like banking and finance, that's where we might see some regulation, some of the consequences of machine learning, and not just kind of broadly about the technology.
Glenn, Elon Musk has warned about an apocalyptic future of AI. Could it be apocalyptic if we get there?
I don't think that's what we should be focused on at this moment. I think that there's so many regulatory issues before we get there, and I don't think we can think about any of this without thinking about the China side of the story. The direction that they're going in this and the potential footprint that they're going to have in this space, I think, is really impactful. And
is it a threat?
Well, I wouldn't view it as much from the national security perspective yet. I would view it more from the whole way that they're treating the data economy and the threats that might potentially have to the way we feel about data in the US and Europe. So that's what I'd be focused on at the moment.
What is the bottom line when it comes to jobs? Is AI going to create more jobs? Is it going to destroy jobs? How do we robot-proof our children to make sure that they have jobs to do when they grow up?
Well, I actually think AI can be a huge opportunity for jobs. The reason is that it's our data that all these systems are trained on. So if we start compensating people for that data, if we actually make a market in user data that rewards the users, then actually that's an opportunity. It's a new chance for us to provide value. But right now we're not being paid. That data is being just taken from us by these companies, and China is a great example. It's going even more in that direction there. If we take it in Europe, they're taking a very different path. They're trying to move the data ownership back to the people who create it. So we have to decide which way we want to go.
There are so many ethical questions that arise here, Mark. What do we know about how, let's say, Google executives specifically are grappling with these ethical questions?
Yeah, we don't know a lot. I mean, they've talked a lot about sort of broad strokes about how they're thinking about responsibility. They're thinking about ethics. DeepMind is an Alphabet AI lab that said when they were acquired by Google, we'll only be acquired if we set up some sort of ethics advisory panel because our AI is so powerful that we need to have safeguards in place. They've given very limited word publicly about what that looks like. I think Google right now is grappling with it. They have a cloud contract with the Pentagon to use their technology with the Pentagon's surveillance drones. And a lot of employees are upset about that and worried about the potential risk for down the line of using the companies and more automated machine learning inside warfare.
All right, Mark Bergen, who covers Alphabet and other tech companies for us, Glenn Weil, principal researcher at Microsoft. Thanks so much for giving us a glimpse of the future. Coming up, we will speak to legendary investor and chair of Kleiner Perkins, John Doerr, from his start at Intel to investing in some of the biggest companies in the world. And if you like Bloomberg News, check us out on the radio. Listen on the Bloomberg Radio app, Bloomberg.com, and in the U.S. on SiriusXM. This is Bloomberg. It is game over for the CEO of GameStop after just 3 months on the job. Michael Mahler abruptly stepped down for personal reasons. GameStop is the largest independent retailer of video games, but is struggling to adapt to a world where more software is being delivered online. And U.S. semiconductors giant Qualcomm is extending its cash tender offer to buy all outstanding shares of Dutch rival NXP to May 25th. It is at least the 11th time Qualcomm has extended the offer. About 13% of NXP shares have been tendered so far. Qualcomm is trying to win Beijing's approval for the proposed $44 billion deal. And Spotify is taking a stance on hate content and hateful conduct. The music streaming service says it will remove music by artists that promote hate and have done things that may be morally or legally questionable. One artist removed from the platform, R. Kelly. A number of women have accused Kelly of sexual abuse, so Spotify has cut ties. And And coming up, we speak to storied investor and chair of Kleiner Perkins, John Doerr, from his start at Intel to investing in some of the biggest companies in the world. That is coming up next. This is Bloomberg. It was a rough start to 2018 for big tech. Strong regulatory headwinds, data scandals, and feuds with the White House all making their mark. But investor confidence is slowly returning. Just look at the stock performance of Facebook, Google, and Amazon in the last month. And one thing all three have in common, they saw early interest from longtime investor John Doerr. From his start at Intel in 1974, he's worn the hats of engineer, venture capitalist, and most recently, chair of Kleiner Perkins. The ventures he has backed have created hundreds of thousands of jobs and become three of the world's most valuable companies. And now he has written a book about the goal-setting techniques that have helped tech giants like Google and Intel thrive. It is called Measure What Matters: How Google, Bono, and the Gates Foundation Rock the World with OKRs. He joins me now here in the studio. John, welcome.
Thank you.
OKRs, objectives and key results. This is a slideshow presentation you've been doing for many, many years.
Yeah.
Companies talk about it all the time like it's their religion. It's about setting objectives and key results. Ideas don't matter so much as execution.
Execution's everything.
What is so radical about this idea?
Well, it's not practiced in almost every company. And what I mean by that is take one feature, just the notion that everybody in an organization would write down their goals and publish them and share them transparently. That's radical in most businesses or nonprofits. And that's just one of 5 things that set it apart.
And you say that it's not just goals being set at the top, but employees setting their own goals.
Everyone,
right?
transparently, top to bottom. So when Larry and Sergey at Google were 24 years old, I took them this goal-setting system. And I'd like to tell you that Sergey said, yes, John, we'll enthusiastically adopt this. The truth is, he said, we don't have any better way to manage the company, so we'll give this one a try. And Emily, every quarter since then, every Googler has written down her objectives and key results, published them internally, graded them, and then tossed them aside, because they don't count for bonuses, they don't count for promotions. They serve a higher purpose, a kind of collective calling and commitment to getting people focused and aligned and tracking on stretching for the things that really matter the most.
So you presented this to Google, where you had just placed your biggest bet of all time in 1999, $11.8 million for 12% of the company. And Larry Page wrote the foreword to your book, and he called it a gift. So I'm curious, what would your OKRs be for Google today? They are grappling with artificial intelligence, self-driving cars, fake news. There's a lot of change that's happened in the last 2 decades.
Well, they have a very clear and crisp set of OKRs. And if I told you what they were, I'd be leaking. But everyone has them. And this quarter, Sundar will stand up in front of 70,000 employees on a webcast and say, these are our Google's objectives and key results, and here are mine personally. And they won't get them all done. They'll maybe achieve 70% of them, and that's considered a great grade.
Now, one of the things you say about OKRs is that they're not a silver bullet. They don't take the place of values or culture.
Or strong management.
Exactly.
Can't substitute for those.
The book is called Measure What Matters. How do you measure something so intangible, culture?
Well, culture answers the question, why? Objectives answer the question, what? Key results answer the question, how? Your question to me was, how do you measure culture? In fact, you do culture surveys. You draw up a definition of what your culture is, and you periodically pulse your organization to say, do you feel we're not just saying, but living up to these values? Be they transparency or aggressiveness or accountability. And I've seen this, Emily, there's no one right culture. Every organization has its own, and different ones can succeed in different ways.
So I want to ask you about Facebook, and I know you're on the board of Google, so you can't say so much about Google, but you can opine about Facebook, and Kleiner was an early investor. We've seen Facebook go through election meddling, also fake news problems, data privacy issues, data being mishandled. What would your OKRs be for Facebook, or what would you recommend that they do in this situation?
Well, it's a little hard being outside the organization to be prescriptive about that. So forgive me for saying that. But I think this is an incredibly well-run company with really good people in it. And I would expect that their internal goals, though I have no way of knowing this, are to achieve a certain measure of growth and engagement together with, paired with, a measure of trust and user satisfaction. And the book talks about the importance of pairing goals. If you go all the way back to Lee Iacocca in the Pinto, he had, with an iron fist, goals to make the least expensive car he could. And the failure was he didn't pair that with a goal in and around quality. So for want of a part that costs less than $1, when someone ran into the back of a Pinto, the gas tank exploded, 100 people died, one of the largest recalls they ever had. So if you just let your goals be one-dimensional, you're going to miss the mark.
You went to the White House, you met with President Trump. This, as you know, questions of tech regulation are looming, a potential trade war. What are your biggest concerns about sort of the economic and business consequences of this administration?
So I'm a red-blooded, patriotic capitalist who believes in free markets, but also in putting a safety net in our economy. And I believe technology fundamentally advantages the rich, not the poor, and education is the countervailing force that provides for upward mobility. I said then, I believe now, that we should invest more in research and development, a lot more across the board, that we should take data which has been bottled up and siloed and liberated, especially in the healthcare system. And this administration is moving very smartly on that front. I'm a believer in free trade. I have differences with the administration on that. But I think this is a really good time for entrepreneurs to start new companies and to be working in the field of technology. I do hold maybe the debatable view that every company either is or is going to become a tech company, that you can't really compete in the new connected world without understanding what artificial intelligence or machine learning can mean to the products and services you offer your customers.
What is your view on artificial intelligence? Elon Musk has said it's apocalyptic. We were just talking about that. It could be.
It'll turn us all into house pets.
Absolutely. I mean, that is certainly one view. Could it get that dark?
I don't think so, but I want to put it in context. It seems every dozen years or so, there's a tsunami-like transformation to the innovation economy. Starting in 1980, it was the microchip in the PC, right? That takes us forward to about a dozen years, 93, 94. The next big wave was the web browser. You remember Mosaic and Netscape and all those internet companies, including all the way up to and through Google. Then in 2006, Steve Jobs introduced the iPhone. And at the same time, the cloud came along. So that was the third great wave to right about today. So fair question is, what is it now, John? And I think this field has been overhyped, but now I think it's underappreciated. And that field is artificial intelligence. It's programs that learn as they go along. It's deep reinforcement learning, neural networks that mimic in some ways the ways humans think. And the effects of this are going to be profound. We can't have self-driving cars without artificial intelligence. What we can do with healthcare is incredibly exciting to me. Right now you can take an image of a retina and not only predict the likelihood that that person will develop diabetes, but also the likelihood of a heart incident in advance. And you can apply artificial intelligence today to all kinds of imaging in healthcare and get better diagnoses than humans can give. We're just getting started.
As our lives become more tech-infused, do you worry about tech addiction or the negative impact of technology? I mean, Chamath Palihapitiya, who worked at Facebook for a long time, has talked about the guilt he feels and how he believes Facebook could be destroying the very fabric of our society.
Yeah, but good parenting can deal with this handily. When my girls were growing up, I had a personal objective to have a healthy family, and a key result that said.
Right, and OKRs can be applied to family life, as you talked about.
In fact, before we end, I want to talk about that. But my key result was to get home for dinner 20 nights a month by 6 p.m. And the paired quality result was to be fully present. So I pulled the plug on the router. Nobody could get to anything on the internet. And, you know, I got that. It was hard. I got it done maybe 70% of the time, which was a pretty good grade.
So you're not worried
No.
about the negative potential of all of these amazing things that are
Not when there's at least one and preferably two diligent parents in a household. I do think we want to be concerned about the families and kids for where that's not the case.
Let's talk about leadership. You know, I mentioned Elon Musk. He's obviously going through production issues at Tesla. There was just an analyst call where he referred to questions as boring and boneheaded. He's got another company, SpaceX. I don't know, what would you recommend to a leader in that position, running two really companies that are really pushing the limits of technology?
Well, the same thing I recommend to other disruptive entrepreneurs. Make sure you have a strategic focus on a large unserved market need. Bring to it a proprietary technology and a commitment to assemble an outstanding management team. Raise a reasonable amount of money. You can raise too much money as well as too little. Above all, never lose your sense of urgency, which allows Tesla to move far faster than the rest of the automotive players. And I recommend you use objectives and key results.
All right, John Doerr, we are going to continue this conversation. Coming up, more of our exclusive conversation with John Doerr, chairman of Kleiner Perkins, including his thoughts on a roadmap to diversity using OKRs and the best opportunities in VC right now. And later, it is not where, but who when it comes to HQ2. As Amazon searches for a new headquarters and prepares to hire 50,000 workers, can it build a workforce that is more diverse? This is Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Technology. I'm Emily Chang in San Francisco. Over the course of his career, Kleiner Perkins chair John Doerr has pretty much seen it all, making early investments in Google, Amazon, and Facebook. He's popularized a management philosophy, objectives and key results with top tech companies, and now we're going to apply that to something else, tech's massive diversity problem. John Doerr with me here now. I do want to mention, you say this is much more than a book. In fact, it's a handbook.
I'd like to say it's a handbook. It's not a business book because it's full of a dozen stories of real entrepreneurs and leaders struggling, succeeding to set goals that matter. But my hope is that this isn't just for businesses. I think we can take OKRs certainly to our nonprofits, but even to our families, our schools, and our government. We're really at a critical moment in time where I think many of our leaders and some of our great institutions have failed us.
What should Trump's OKRs be?
I don't know. I haven't given that thought, and that's a really very good question. But I would imagine they're grow the economy, have the country be respected in and around the world. His objective would probably be make America great again, right? The objectives are very important to get. So too are the key results. And so I can see us using, well, let me say this. Sylvia and Matthew Burrows used OKRs to manage the Ebola crisis. Government is to be transparent and accountable. So why not have a city council adopt this system of goal setting? I think we can and we must measure what really matters.
So let's talk about diversity in Silicon Valley, because we are increasingly holding Silicon Valley to account when it comes to diversity, and I know that you are very aware of this problem. You know, as you're advising young companies, how do you tell them how to approach setting goals and results for something that is so important but so easily is lost sight of?
So the first thing I ask them to do is answer the question why. And the answer to the question why we do this work, why we're on this, is all important. And it'll reflect and be expressed in both our values and the mission statement. And you ought to have a powerful, inspiring mission, because that's going to help you get the people together to do it. Something like organize all the world's information and make it available to everybody for free, anywhere, anytime. That's pretty timeless. And something like connect everybody in the world. So you've got to get the mission and the values right. And then this goal system, these objectives and key results. I think of those as kind of transparent vessels, the what and the how, into which we pour these values. Because it's very clear that the transformational teams have managed to combine passion with purpose in a way that says they clearly know how to answer the question why we do the work that matters the most.
So I just wrote a story in Business Week with my colleagues challenging Amazon to build its new headquarters. They're starting from scratch, 50,000 new workers, to shoot for 50-50. Is that a fair proposal?
I think that's a great goal, and not so much for social equality or for social progress, but because we know that diverse groups make better business decisions. The data shows it. And so, you know, until we, the tech industry, the venture industry, and Kleiner Perkins get to a 50-50 world that reflects the customers we're trying to serve, the society we work in, we're making less good decisions. So
I have to ask you about your reflections on Ellen Pao in light of the Me Too movement. And obviously, you know, she sued your firm for gender discrimination, lost in court, but public opinion maybe had mixed feelings. In this new world, as we have this national conversation, what are your sort of reflections on that?
So it's hard to add much to what's been said or written, or in fact, you and I have discussed before about Ellen Pao. I'm human. The whole situation made me very sad. I think she's doing good work now, and I really do wish her well. I think the more important, not the more important question, I think the other dimension to this is I and we should have zero tolerance for a workplace that makes anyone in that workplace uncomfortable. And on the particular question of diversity, I think you know we've been a leader in this field, and we don't think we've gone far enough. So there's 3 areas in which I've been fighting really hard to make more progress at Kleiner. One of which is in our own people, our partnership. The second is our portfolio. And then the third is the pipeline. In our own partnership, 21% of our investing professionals are female. The average for the venture industry is pathetic. It's 9%, as you know. Within our portfolio, 9% of our CEOs or founders are female. The average in the tech industry is 2.7%. That's outrageous. And with respect to the pipeline, in 2015, 10% of the participants in the Kleiner Fellows program, which is harder to get into than to get into Harvard, were female. This year, it's 50-50, and 11% of them are African American. So I'm not satisfied with where we are. I think we all have to do more, but we just have to put women and minorities in positions of power if we're going to right this wrong. So you've brought in some new blood. Mamoun Hamid joined the firm. Ilya Fushin.
Ilya.
Wonderful talent.
We've heard he's sort of your heir apparent, Mamoun is. Talk to us a little bit about the transition that's to come and how you expect the firm to change over the next few years.
So Kleiner's in very good shape. I'm really excited about it. One of my key results when I took on this new role was to help the team attract and grow more talent. It's important to note, though, that Kleiner has always been in transition. Since I joined it in 1980, we had partners who were in their 60s, 50s, 40s, and 30s. And so I had kind of an outsized presence, maybe externally. But this is a very natural process that I think is going well.
Where do you see the biggest opportunities in venture capital right now? Crypto? Warren Buffett just called it rat poison squared,
Yeah.
if that's any context.
I think Charlie Munger said he was transferring turds.
Right. Do you think Bitcoin is a good investment, or crypto in general?
I think that blockchain is a very powerful new technology. It's not as big a deal as mobility when I talk about these tsunamis. And I don't think it's as big as AI. But we have invested both in blockchain and the use of blockchain to facilitate international and cross-border transactions. I'd love to see blockchain applied in a powerful way to the healthcare system, so that you have fine-grained control over where your health information goes, so that you can automatically at any time have a longitudinal record of all your healthcare experiences.
What else? What's next?
We invested in an ICO.
But in tech more broadly, I mean, where do you see the opportunities in the next 10 years?
I think they're in artificial intelligence. I remain convinced that selectively they are in the areas of innovations around energy and energy technologies. I'm quite convinced we'll see a lot more disruption in systems for enterprises. I want to say this, though. The big tech giants, especially those with strong positions in consumer markets, they're a lot more competitive than their predecessors were. And so I think it's harder to start a new consumer internet-based venture.
All right. John Doerr, chair of Kleiner Perkins, out with a new book, Measure What Matters, or a handbook, we should say.
New handbook. It's at whatmatters.com.
All right. Thank you so much, John, for
Thanks.
joining us. Great to have you. All right. The European Union's General Data Protection Regulation goes into effect May 25th. But how exactly does GDPR work, and does it have a chance of inspiring similar data privacy laws in the U.S.? Bloomberg Quick Take gives you all you need to know.
You may have seen a few of these pop up on your phone or in your email. Google, Facebook, Twitter, Amazon, Square, GoDaddy, Tesco, Sainsbury's, H&M, and many more are updating their policies to give consumers more control over their personal data. Those updates and changes are thanks to a new law governing data privacy called the General Data Protection Regulation, or GDPR. The catch is, GDPR only applies to people who live in the European Union. But its adoption is largely expected to have Americans asking, why don't we have that? Here's how data collection currently works. When you sign up for, let's say, Facebook, you have to click a box agreeing to the company's terms. Those terms give Facebook the right to track your online activities, even if you're not actively browsing Facebook. Facebook can let third parties access it in order to sell ads and services.
Consumers will have the right to ask for copies of anything as basic as messages sent to them or by them.
That's Bloomberg tech editor Nate Langson.
Up to entire archives of all the content they've generated on a service.
On May 25th, companies with more than 250 employees and that hold data on European citizens will have to get unambiguous consent from users to collect their data, instead of just burying that OK inside fine print. It will also make it much easier to revoke consent users had previously given. For consumers that do opt in, they have a right to know what's being done with their data, and instead of being charged to obtain it, can request a free copy.
For companies like Google and Facebook, they've been making data available for download and deletion upon request for quite some time.
Consumers also have the right to be forgotten, which lets citizens request that organizations delete their data. Data portability. That gives consumers the right to retrieve their data and sell it to other companies. So, for example, you may be able to trade something like a gift certificate from Zara in exchange for your shopping history from J.Crew. If a firm has a data breach, companies must notify the authorities within 72 hours, and any failure to comply with this new law will be costly. Penalty fines can be as high as 4% of a company's global annual revenue.
Europe expects companies to act within the spirit of the law and not just to try and follow it to the letter. This means there'll be disputes and legal precedents to be set over the coming years.
So while the US is still reeling over Facebook and the Cambridge Analytica scandal, the EU is moving ahead with tough new rules. Many will ask if the US should be next.
Coming up, 78% of Amazon's senior execs and manager positions are filled by men, but the company has a chance to shoot for 50-50 at its new headquarters. We're going to tell you which cities give it the best chance of building a more diverse workforce. This is Bloomberg. Amazon has turned the selection process for its new headquarters into a months-long reality show. 20 cities are now on the short list, but we are about to recommend 3 in particular. And it's not where, but who that may matter most. Amazon faces a stunning lack of diversity, like many tech companies, with men holding 73% of professional jobs and 78% of leadership roles. HQ2 offers the company a unique opportunity to diversify its workforce in a record amount of time. My colleagues and I at Bloomberg Businessweek have a modest proposal to Amazon in this week's edition of the magazine. When Amazon creates 50,000 new jobs at HQ2, why not shoot for 50-50, men and women, and representing people of color in line with the local population? Joining me now to discuss, Christy Coulter, former Amazon employee who has held various senior roles across the company, from Amazon Publishing to Amazon Go, and Bloomberg Businessweek's Jeff Green, who covers corporate diversity and helped write this story with me. So, Jeff, first of all, set the lay of the land for us. Where is Amazon now? Where could it be?
Well, that is the question. If you look at where they are in terms of their attraction, men versus women, they obviously are predominantly male employees, 70-some% to 25% in the upper echelons of the company, 60-40 overall. They trend male in their job listings. Everything about the company is positioned somewhat male, which is an impediment if you want to be gender neutral, which is kind of what we're challenging them to do.
So, Christy, having worked at Amazon, I'm curious what you think of this proposal. Is it realistic?
I love the proposal. I think it's realistic insofar as if anyone can get this done, it would be a company as bold and not afraid to kind of break the mold as Amazon. I think it'll be a matter of not just hiring 50-50, but then retaining 50-50. And that's where I think that Amazon maybe has some cultural tweaks to do to get there. But sure, so why not give it a shot?
Talk to us about the culture as you experienced, the good and the bad, and what might be working against a more diverse workforce.
Sure. Well, I was at Amazon for 12 years, so obviously there was a lot of good in it for me. I wouldn't have stuck around otherwise. The good is that it's incredibly innovative. I don't think I was ever bored a day. There were times a little boredom might have been okay. You get to work on huge problems and do things people don't think are possible. The downside is it's an aggressive culture, I think, to a fault, in that it kind of encourages behaviors that men are typically rewarded for, like disagreeing openly, like being very aggressive, being sort of loud with your opinions. And it's not necessarily an environment where women have been trained or raised in our culture to succeed by emulating those same behaviors. So it's behaviors that men tend to be rewarded for and women tend to be punished for. And there's also the fact that you're just often the only woman in the room because of the numbers, and that can be a hard way to feel like you're being authentic.
Now, I did talk to a senior woman at Amazon who had only positive things to say about the culture. Muge Erderik Dogan, director of Amazon Flex, which is the last mile delivery service, told me it's not for everyone. It's an ownership culture, and you need to come to work every day and treat whatever business you're working on as if it was your own business. It is an amazing place. It's not an easy place. And Jeff, we spoke to people who are close to the search process for HQ2. They are doing some things like talking to cities about their representation of women programmers, talking to them about potential partnerships with schools and the STEM pipeline, if you will. And you actually did some math, and based on those things, picked 3 cities where HQ2 would have the best chance of getting to 50-50. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting when you look at what percentage, we kind of looked at what percentage of the local population are female programmers, what percentage are women, and we also looked at the minority situation to see kind of how are these cities balanced. And Toronto, Chicago, and sort of the greater Washington, D.C. area all look well, or all look great. The question is, which of those do you choose? Washington, D.C. has political overtones. Toronto obviously doesn't go with Make America Great Again. So, maybe Chicago ends up being sort of the compromise location. But if you really want to do what Amazon needs to do, 50-50 isn't just 50%, because that's the workforce. You need to have 50% in all the positions so that women are represented in every pay position too. So you need a diverse workforce where women are represented in the the well-paying jobs, and that's really important. And that's why those three cities kind of look like good choices.
And let's talk about that when it comes to Amazon. Jeff Bezos has 10 people on his senior leadership team that all report to him. All of them are white. One of them is a woman, the head of human resources, Beth Galetti. Also, Amazon's board is 70% male, all white. There are 3 women on the board. And the company the board just recommended a vote against a shareholder proposal to use the Rooney Rule when interviewing new directors, which basically means making sure that there are women and people of color among the interview candidates. Christy, what do you make of that?
I was really disappointed to hear that. I think the Rooney Rule is great. My own husband runs a much smaller company. He implemented the Rooney Rule for their hiring, and they've been thrilled with the results that they've seen. I was happy to see in the Recode article that I read about this that Amazon employees are actually speaking up about it, because there was a culture for a long time where it felt like it really wasn't okay to talk about diversity or to even acknowledge the company's lack of diversity, and it seems like that's changing. So whether it's through the Rooney Rule or some other route, I'm just glad to see that employees who do care about this, in my experience, are pushing for change.
All right, Christy Coulter, former Amazon employee, as well as Bloomberg Businessweek's Jeff Green. It's a provocative proposal. We will see how Amazon responds. Coming up, it is smaller than a football end zone, and it makes as much leafy greens as an entire football field. The farm in a box is next. This is Bloomberg. The vertical farming market in 2016 was valued at somewhere between $1.5 to $2 billion. And it's got people growing food in places like skyscrapers, warehouses, and yes, shipping containers, which is just what Boston-based Freight Farms is doing. Bloomberg's Caroline Hyde looks at what it is like to farm in a box.
This may look like your typical burger, topped with all the fixings, including that leafy green lettuce, cut, washed and cooked at Be Good in Brooklyn. Farm-to-table greens, only it's a different kind of farm. A 320-square-foot husk of a shipping container in the heart of downtown Manhattan. Repurposed to grow 2.4 tons of produce every year, it's called the Leafy Green Machine, and it's the brainchild of Boston-based Freight Farms. It's part of the new wave of vertical farming that's set to be a $6.4 billion industry by 2023.
Shipping containers were pretty much everywhere in the city, at the dockyard, on trucks and everything. Shipping containers are widely available, they're durable, and the infrastructure is already built to move them around. On top of that, you get a lot of refrigerated shipping containers off the secondary market, so they have insulation already built into the walls, floors, and ceiling.
Designed to be eco-friendly, using only 125 kilowatt hours per day. According to Freight Farms, that's as much electricity as 2 family homes. And what about the most precious of resources? This new techno farm requires only 5 gallons every day. LGM claims that's 98% less H2O than traditional farming. And you can operate it from your smartphone. Currently, there are around 200 leafy green machines in 12 countries.
We all know land is at a premium, certainly in New York, the price of real estate. We're producing the same amount of food as 1.8 acres of farmland, but we're doing it in 320 square feet. That's like producing the same amount of food as a farm the size of a football stadium in a space smaller than 1 end zone.
The yields per week? Well, that could be 35 to 80 pounds of leafy greens, or 500 full heads of lettuce. And according to the United Nations, in order to feed another 2 billion people by the time 2050 rolls around, we'll need to produce 50% more to eat across the world. And for people that live in harsh climate conditions that make growing produce nearly impossible, an old shipping container might be the delivery they need.
That was Bloomberg's Caroline Hyde. And all of next week, you will be able to see more of the technical innovations taking place in Boston, because that's where we will be broadcasting from. May 14th to 18th, the show will be live from a different location every evening, showcasing the innovation, diversity, and power of the regional tech economy that is Boston. Bloomberg Radio will also be live there with its own programming 4 to 6 p.m. Eastern Time. And that does it for this edition of Bloomberg Technology. Have a wonderful weekend. This is Bloomberg.